Thank you for the invite to this beautiful library, which I have never been to before, but I'm going to be sure to explore after this. So my name is Nikhil. I moved to Cleveland in '92. A little bit about myself. My day job, I work for Case Western Reserve University as an IT manager. I've been an information technology professional for over 15 years, and I've always had a arm's length interest in the world of digital currencies, mostly because I felt they were the untouched territory that the internet had not quite solved yet, even though we had solved a lot of issues and innovated a lot of issues around communication. Finance was still kind of railed on the old architectures from pre-internet, adapted into our internet age. And Bitcoin and what they refer to as cryptocurrencies, digital currencies, which we'll talk about in a little bit, something called the blockchain-based currencies, are the revolutionary thing that makes something like Bitcoin possible, and something for, and we'll see how the reason why Bitcoin is different than a lot of past currencies, mostly because Bitcoin is decentralized in nature, it's open source, nobody owns the code, there's no central authority that monitors or governs it. It's a very democratic, elective system of currency, which is something we really haven't seen yet in the world, and it's something that makes Bitcoin and other coins like it the first real true world currency, much like we have state-issued currencies, such as the US dollar and euro. Bitcoin can often be thought about as our first true world currency that does not have borders and is not issued by any kind of central authority. So my company CoinNEO, I put together last year as an entity for me to really explore digital currencies much deeper, especially Bitcoin, and provide a locale for Northeast Ohioans who are curious about Bitcoin to have a trusted local resource to ask questions about it. Bitcoin's history has a lot of controversy, but it also has a lot of highlights which are far more important in my belief. And what I wanted to do with CoinNEO was create local technology projects starting in my community to showcase the diversity of Bitcoin, showcase what it can be used for, how it's being used in other areas of the world, and the fact that this global phenomenon, this global kind of strange currency could be used right here at our brick and mortar stores in our community. This was also an effort for me to give back to my community where I live and showcase it as a tech-forward, innovative place. And so, since I was invited in February, a lot has happened in Cleveland Heights, including all of these media mentions that we've received. So we're going to go into that, but what I really want to talk about is where Bitcoin can fit into your everyday lives, opportunities that might be there for your own businesses to answer your questions about Bitcoin, no matter what it's about. And we're going to do basically a Bitcoin 101 today, which I've given several of these talks, and they're getting a little bit better every time. So that's a bit about me. I do have a question about who's in the room right now. So do we have small business owners in the room? A couple. Do we have anybody who does international wire transfers or international remittance to family members? Anybody in the room like that? No? I guess technologists? Good. All right. So this is going to be an interesting audience, and the audience that I really like to speak with, because I feel like there is certainly a lot of education that can happen around this thing that we're hearing about in the news all the time. So I like to talk about the one question that a lot of Bitcoiners really kind of dread hearing is, what is Bitcoin? Because it encapsulates so much, and depending on what context you're talking about, it really depends on the definition of what is Bitcoin. And I like to take it a little step back and talk about what the architecture of Bitcoin is built on. So we've all emailed family members pictures and maybe shared musical files or emailed people. And when we do that, they can duplicate those pictures and send them off again. They can reproduce those digital assets and send them off and keep sending them off and keep sending them off. And that's not something you want to have with a money system. And that's something that the internet has not been able to solve until something called the blockchain was invented. So what is Bitcoin? It's an application of the blockchain. The blockchain uses the internet to stop the ability to duplicate and revoke digital assets. So I can send somebody a token, a blockchain, a Bitcoin token, and I have no ability to get that back from them. They can't duplicate and mass produce that token and share it with anybody else. So that utility is what makes Bitcoin possible as a currency. It can be used for many other things. It can be used for contract negotiations. It can be used for mortgages. It can be used for elections. It can be used for any purpose where you've traditionally needed a third party to do something, to conduct your business in whatever area of life that is. You can use the blockchain to do that with irrevocable proof that this transaction happened. Irrevocable, undeniable proof. And so this new characteristic of digital asset transfers is what makes Bitcoin possible. So Bitcoin is one of possibly hundreds or thousands of applications you might hear about over the next 20 years that use the blockchain as its core technology. The blockchain is really what's new here. And we can talk about the blockchain more in detail at the Q&A, but when I talk about what is Bitcoin, it really is just a small fraction of what the blockchain provides. So what I'm going to show is a video which you can find on bitcoin.org. It tries to answer the question, what is Bitcoin? We're going to watch the video. It goes by kind of quick. And again, we're going to use the Q&A to go over more detail of what it means. But it does a pretty good job. Obviously, one of the problems of Bitcoin right now is its messaging issue. What is Bitcoin? And it's one of the things that we're trying to solve in this early stage of education here, as the whole world is trying to figure it all out. So we do have a video I'll play here, which tries to get at the essentials of what is Bitcoin.
What is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is the first decentralized digital currency. Bitcoins are digital coins you can send through the internet. Compared to other alternatives, Bitcoins have a number of advantages. Bitcoins are transferred directly from person to person via the net, without going through a bank or clearinghouse. This means that the fees are much lower, you can use them in every country, your account cannot be frozen, and there are no prerequisites or arbitrary limits. Let's look at how it works. Bitcoins are generated all over the internet by anybody running a free application called a Bitcoin miner. Mining requires a certain amount of work for each block of coins. This amount is automatically adjusted by the network such that Bitcoins are always created at a predictable and limited rate. Your Bitcoins are stored in your digital wallet, which might look familiar if you use online banking. When you transfer Bitcoins, an electronic signature is added. After a few minutes, the transaction is verified by a miner and permanently and anonymously stored in the network. The Bitcoin software is completely open source and anybody can review the code. Bitcoin is changing finance the same way the web changed publishing. When everyone has access to a global market, great ideas flourish. Let's look at some examples of how Bitcoins are already used today. You can purchase video games, gifts, books, servers, and alpaca socks. Several currency exchanges exist where you can trade your Bitcoins for dollars, euros, and more. Bitcoins are a great way for small businesses and freelancers to get noticed. It doesn't cost anything to start accepting them, there are no chargebacks or fees, and you'll get additional business from the Bitcoin economy. For your first Bitcoins and more information, visit weusecoins.com.
So what excites me about that is that Bitcoin is really the first time we've seen any kind of competition towards traditional banking. Instead of, as we swipe credit cards and it goes to a private banking data center somewhere in the globe to verify that transaction and send it along, we're using Bitcoin miners. We're using the internet to validate that transaction. So we basically abstract the middleman out of the picture, and you don't have to go by those middleman rules, and you don't have to pay the middleman fees. And when we talk about things like buying alpaca socks, this is really revolutionary for electronic payments around the globe, especially for a business that does electronic payments through credit card, because you no longer have to pay fees to private institutions to accept electronic payment from anywhere in the world. So we'll talk a little bit about Bitcoin language here. So again, I like to really use the analogy that this is really no different than any other currency in the world. It just happens to not be issued by a central authority. And it has lots of characteristics in the language. We're used to 1 cent being our lowest unit of currency for the dollar. In Bitcoin, that's 1 Satoshi. Bitcoin goes down 8 decimal places instead of 2. 1 Bitcoin today is, well, this slide's a little bit old, about $400 a week ago. 0.01 Bitcoin is referred to as a cent of Bitcoin, worth $4. 0.001, a mill of Bitcoin, worth 40 cents. And then you can go further down the line, there's other definitions. So when you pay for something in Bitcoin, you can use your local currency and let the network do all of this translation in the background. So you can still pay $49 for your alpaca socks, and your Bitcoin wallet will show $49, and the invoice will show $49, but the exchange rate will be done by the network in real time, so you don't have to worry about all these kind of, far decimal places. Question? Yeah.
Suppose 2 months ago I bought something with 1 Bitcoin. All right? And let's say the Bitcoin was worth $1,200 at that point, which it was because I looked it up on the internet.
Yeah.
I go to take that same object today and I put it out there for sale, and I can't get but $400 for it.
Right. So as a merchant, you have options on how you want to sell your products. And this is going to be one of the things you want to consider if you want to accept Bitcoin in your store. In your store, you present everything as dollars in your local currency, no matter where in the globe you are. If I'm selling a product for $400, I'm selling for $400 no matter what mechanism I'm using. Whether somebody's paying with Bitcoin or Euro, I'm getting $400 for that asset, correct? In the case of the Euro, the bank is doing the exchange rate for you, and the individual is going to lose their Euro, you're going to get your dollars. In this case, the internet's doing that transaction for you. The individual is going to be reduced their Bitcoin. You're still going to get $400 for that asset.
How did I buy the Bitcoin originally for $1,200?
So if you want to buy Bitcoin itself, you can use various online exchanges, such as very similar to what you'd find at an airport if you're going to buy a foreign currency. There's exchanges where you can do that in person, online. There's a big exchange in San Francisco called Coinbase where you can just sign up with your email address, link your checking account, and buy at the current market rate.
I use my checking account by the current market.
Yeah, it's an ACH transfer.
The only problem I would like to, why I came here tonight is to get the answer to this question. 2 months ago when the Bitcoin was worth $1,200, if I hold my Bitcoins today, look at what I lost. If that same thing happened to gold, the economy would dump.
The same thing has happened to gold, but I am not here evangelizing anybody invest in Bitcoin.
No, I'm just trying to understand.
And let me go back to this. So Bitcoin today is up 250% over what it was 12 months ago. It has grown exponentially every year that it's been in existence. So from an investment standpoint, if you did get in at the beginning, it's been a heck of an investment, shooting up from fractions of a cent to what it is today at $330 the last I checked. It was at about $1,200 back in December of 2013. Again, what we get to see today with Bitcoin and its volatility is a very new technology and a very new asset being affected by markets in real time that you get to see, such as the reason it was 1,200 was China. The Chinese obviously launched their Bitcoin exchange. The Chinese mining farms occurred, which exponentially grew the Bitcoin economy. And then the U.S. Senate hearings happened on electronic currencies, which the Secret Service and various representatives from the U.S. government basically gave their blessing for Bitcoin. So what we saw was an increase from about $800 to $1,200 within 1 or 2 days. And then naturally we saw a correction of that market because it should never have been that high, and it got sold off and went back down. So from an investment standpoint, it is extremely volatile, and we can talk a whole bunch about my opinions about investing in Bitcoin and why I still think it's a very exciting prospect.
I'll only ask one more question.
Yeah, no, ask many questions, please. Uh-oh. Yeah.
What does the Federal Reserve have to say about all this?
The Federal Reserve does not touch it because they don't have anything to do with it. So they've actually specifically said that people have asked them, can you regulate and make statements about Bitcoin? They say they don't have anything to do with Bitcoin, so that's not their position. We've had FinCEN, which is the Federal Enforcement Crimes Network, who has declared Bitcoin as money and regulate it as money. So just as you would if you wanted to start an ATM business, you'd have to file as a money services business. Or if you wanted to open up a currency exchange, you'd still have to follow the same rules you would for digital currencies as you would for fiat or any other kind of currency. Now, the contradiction there is if you are going by the IRS rules. So the IRS earlier this year gave their guidance declaring Bitcoin as property. So if you want to file your taxes for your Bitcoin assets, IRS considers them property. So you have to calculate your capital gains and losses. Which makes it very difficult from a consumer if I have to pay capital gain or loss every time I want to buy a carton of milk with Bitcoin. You know, and so these have very, these are evolving as we speak. I mean, there's lots of lobbying groups and people that are trying, including myself. We'll talk about some issues we have at the state level right now with some things we're trying to do in Cleveland Heights, where regulators just, this is new to them too, as it is to all of us. And people like myself are aware that decisions are going to be made, you know, quickly at some points because people do need some answers and some stability, but there's also a lot of evolution happening, and we're hoping that we can be brought to the table rather than just shun away. Yes?
Yeah, in that movie it said transaction fees were low. Is there transaction fees? And if so, who's getting the transaction fees? And how does a miner get paid? What are they in it for?
Sure. So there are transaction fees. The transaction fees are on the consumer, the sender of the money. So the Bitcoin network, there's two ways to make money off the network itself. One is being a miner. So we can talk about, I'm almost wondering if I should just flip ahead to the mining aspects. So what is mining? There's a Bitcoin core software. It's an open source software. It's available on GitHub. You can go download it yourself and install it on your own computer, and you are now a miner. You are now one of the people taking part in validating the transactions on the Bitcoin network. Okay, we've done that. It's on our computer and running. How do we make money off of that? Well, the minting process of Bitcoins. Bitcoin is pre-programmed to only mint 21 million Bitcoins in its existence. And it's going to do that over probably the next 30 or 40 years. And it was designed that way to mimic a finite resource, much like gold or any other physical good. And so the miner's part in this ecosystem is that as they validate transaction, they're also responsible for minting the Bitcoins. And there's a rewards-based system where every 10 minutes, today, 25 Bitcoins are minted, and those are rewarded to various miners based on the amount of work they've done. And so today, the incentive for miners is to mine to get the newly minted Bitcoins, which then they probably spend and put back into the ecosystem and however they may, depending on who gets the new Bitcoins. So that'll happen up until 21 million. There's a whole other side. So then what's the incentive to mine after that happens, if there's no more Bitcoins being minted? Well, the other thing that happens is when I send a Bitcoin or when I send any kind of money over the Bitcoin network, I'm also attaching a very, very tiny fee to that, which today is hovering at around maybe 1 or 2 cents. The sender pays that fee, not the recipient. And it's an optional fee. And what that fee does is it encourages miners to use their computers to do the processing on that transaction. And so all those mining fees collect up over 10 minutes or however many minutes, and then when the new mined Bitcoins are minted, those mining fees are attached to that and sent to the miner as well. So once all the Bitcoins are mined, and there aren't none left to be mined, the miners will rely on the Bitcoin mining fees solely. So
You just said it was an optional fee.
it is an optional fee. So as a sender, so this is one of the protections you want to have when you're thinking about accepting Bitcoin or using Bitcoin in general. So the sender has an option to include a fee with that. They can do 0 fee, but there's a chance if you do that, albeit a very small chance, that that transaction will never get sent and the recipient will never get it. This is a problem for people that are doing very high value transactions. You wouldn't want somebody to leave your store without making sure that your transaction has gone through. You know, we've tested low value transactions, high value transactions with no fees, and I've never had one fail. That's not to say that it couldn't fail. Attaching a fee to it basically guarantees that your transaction will go through.
So in other words, somebody could reject that transaction if there's no fee associated with
Technically, the miners could reject it. Exactly right. They can set their software up to make sure that they do not accept zero fee transactions. So, as a sender, it is a responsible thing as a Bitcoin consumer to send a transaction fee. It's kind of shunned against in the community sometimes to not send that, especially by the miners. There are talks as the Bitcoin software gets developed more to have the option to let the recipient require a fee, so that if you are asking for money, such as a merchant would, that you will say, hey, this costs so-and-so many dollars, but it's also going to require a mining fee of 1 or 2 cents. So that gives some protections to the recipient, which these are all things being discussed for future versions of the Bitcoin protocol. And right now, I'll be the first to say that Bitcoin is not perfect, but it has come a very long way. And these types, it was never meant to be used at a brick and mortar level, at a small transaction level. Bitcoin wasn't designed with what they call micropayments in mind. Mind you, micropayments are also a problem with any payment processor, PayPal, Visa. You ask any merchant, they're usually paying 30 cents, 20 cents for every swipe of a credit card on top of their 1.5% to 4%, which is why you often see at a restaurant, you'll be charged 50 cents extra if you're paying less than $5 for this item, because microtransactions are just not encouraged in any situation unless you're doing pure cash, especially electronic transactions. So Bitcoin is not absolved of that either. So microtransactions are, that's something that's happening much more often than the original developers intended or thought of, because they thought, oh, well, I can send $1 million across the globe now for 2 cents. But who's doing that? So we want to buy our chips and our cookies. Yes? Who is the developer? So there is a group of developers right now who is responsible for maintaining the code for the open source code. The original inventor of Bitcoin is unknown. It's a pseudonym called Satoshi Nakamoto. Could be a person, could be an entity, could be, a group of people who released a white paper for this invention and released the code to the public and decided to have nothing to do with it. Possibly, maybe, because they didn't want a central entity associated with this, because it really doesn't go with the spirit of it. No one really knows. So right now there are a group of developers who maintain the software, and that software you can go and scrutinize yourself. The interesting thing about Bitcoin, which is unlike most state-issued currencies, is that in order for any changes in this currency system to occur, it's done by a democratic vote of the miners. So it's often referred to as a consensus-based network. So let's say you have 1,000 miners in the world, which we have way more than that. There's probably hundreds of thousands of miners in the world. But in order for Bitcoin to change, and you have 1,000 miners, 501 of those miners need to install the new software. So that means that they have to have scrutinized it, accepted it, gone through the community, decided that the changes that were being made to this code are appropriate for the entire globe, and then install it on their computers and upgrade it, and then it becomes true. So there is no single person that can change the Bitcoin core protocol. It can't happen unless the miners democratically elect it to happen by installing the new versions of the software. And you're talking about the biggest and brightest computer engineers in the world, by the thousands, would have to agree on this. So that is a very important system of checks and balances that is built into cryptocurrencies, distributed cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin. Does that answer? Is that okay? Yeah, please.
From a consumer's point of view, back to the other gentleman's question here.
Yeah.
You have to buy and own a Bitcoin or some portion of it, before you go in and make a purchase.
Correct.
But you don't know what the value of that Bitcoin is before you make that purchase. Or I'm assuming you can, on your computer, find out what it is.
You can find it out.
It might have no bearing to what you paid for.
It won't have any bearing to what you paid for, because the market is alive 24/7. So here's what. This happens with the Visa and MasterCard networks every day too. We just don't see it because we're not used to such volatility. So Visa and MasterCard release their exchange rates daily. They do a daily exchange rate worldwide, and they post that to their website. So if you're traveling, you can look up and see what your daily exchange rate's going to be. And Visa and MasterCard will basically assume the volatility of that for you, and possibly charge you every time you use your credit card in a foreign nation. All right, so that's already happening. In the Bitcoin world, that's real time. There is no daily exchange rate posted. So when you have Bitcoin currency and want to spend it, you're going to know what you're paying for that at the fair market value in real time, rather than some company telling you what you're going to pay for it. So as a consumer, this day and age, it doesn't maybe make a lot of sense, especially for an American who has a very stable currency backing them. There are other nations where their currencies are far less stable than Bitcoin, and it might make much more sense for somebody in one of those nations to use it as a consumer. The way I kind of see America leading the Bitcoin economy is through the architecture, the software development, the protocols, and the consumer aspect of it is very interesting and fun and fascinating, and people are using it because a lot of people have made a lot of money off of it, so they have an incentive to use it anyway because deflationary money is kind of fun to use because it keeps going up, But you're right. You could have bought it for $1,200 yesterday, and buying something for $300 today is not a very smart thing to do. But a lot of people maybe aren't spending Bitcoins today as a consumer because the market's so low, whereas they were much more willing to 6 months ago because the market was so much higher.
It seems like the consumer is accepting a great deal of volatility.
They are. If you are going to buy Bitcoins, that is a very high risk, and it's not something that I encourage. I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to make investment advice here. I think that if you're, personally speaking, I put non-scared money into Bitcoin. Don't put any, but other people have very different views on it. You have some of the top venture capitalists in the world buying boatloads of it. We're seeing hundreds of millions of venture capitalist money going into software development companies that are building businesses around Bitcoin. You have top investors investing millions of dollars in Bitcoin as long investments. So, it's a big gamble on the future of digital currencies and whether or not we think the internet does it need it? Those questions haven't been answered yet.
So when you had your Bitcoin,
yeah,
that you paid $1,000 for, and let's say it's now worth $1,200.
Yeah.
How do I get my $1,200 out of that?
Well, if you're using something like Coinbase, you can just do a withdrawal into your checking account. It's just like going to an airport and getting your cash back, So you can either sell it to somebody in person and get cash for it, or you can use an exchange like Coinbase and just say, oh, take that out on my Bitcoin wallet and put it in my U.S. bank account.
Yeah.
And
is there a fee on that?
Coinbase charges 1%.
Okay.
Yeah, so let's keep going. So we've talked about the consumer perspective. This is a chart of the volatility. You don't have to spend too much time. Back in November of 12, it was almost zero. It went up to $1,200. Now it's back down to around $350. We can talk about all that in the next part of the Q&A. Again, bridging the concept with reality. What is it? It's taking the money out of your leather wallet and putting it in a digital wallet. Everything else resides on our smartphone these days. There's digital wallets that you can download for your smartphone. You can send your Bitcoins to your digital wallet and use those as a consumer at places that accept Bitcoin. Instead of handing over a credit card or cash, you scan a code and send the money. The internet validates it rather than a central bank. These are just some wallets. The one on the bottom right, Coin Pocket, was developed by a guy right here in Cleveland. Consumer protections I like to talk about. None of these breaches that we see in Target and Home Depot would have happened in a Bitcoin world. You're not sending over your 16 digits to your personal bank account to who knows who. It uses QR codes often, which are the ones on the right there, those square things we see often. In that QR code might be embedded a value and a destination for the recipient's wallet. So you can send Bitcoins using your phone, scan that with a camera, and you can send however much money you'd want to that. That's actually a live QR code. The last presentation I gave last week, somebody in the audience took out their cell phone and sent me $1, right, using that QR code. So it's also kind of fun in that regard. I had a Skype conference with some people in the Netherlands that were sitting at a restaurant, and they had a QR code, and I sent a QR code. I sent money right from my living room in Cleveland Heights through Skype using my phone and Bitcoin, and they received it immediately. So it opens up a whole new way of thinking about money transmission, which really interests people who are doing international remittance, sending money back home to their families, which is a huge industry. where the private institutions that do that take massive gains off the top of that, upwards of 12 to 30%. Even with the volatility, if you bought, sent, and sold, I highly doubt you'll ever reach the type of fees that you'll be paying in these kind of private transactions. Again, another illustrator of where Bitcoin fits in. This is right off of Visa's website. It shows their process. Visa cardholder, merchant, acquirer, goes to Visa's network, issuer to the other bank through Visa's network, finally to the merchant. What Bitcoin does, it abstracts the whole banking process and uses the internet and miners for that. So you're basically Bitcoin holder to the merchant, use the internet instead of a private banking data center, the merchant gets the money. And that's where the Bitcoin miners and the blockchain fits in. We'll watch this at the Q&A. We talked a lot about mining already. I don't think this is going to really be relevant, considering we've pretty much covered all of it.
Well, can we see it anyway?
Yeah, of course, if you're interested in it.
Yeah. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Mining is a very complicated topic. You could spend hours on that alone, but let's watch this.
Is there a limit as to how many coins can be mined in a year?
Yeah, so the minting process is controlled by the software, so it is completely predictable. And it is, I think it's about 25 Bitcoins every 10 minutes, and that halves every 4 years. So you can see exactly, what the progression of the Bitcoin looks like. This QuickTime thing isn't working, but let's launch it on YouTube. So yeah, the minting process is completely predictable. It can't be inflated by manipulation. And let's just go here and see if we can pull up the mining video. I think this is it.
What is Bitcoin mining? Bitcoin operates as a peer-to-peer network. This means that everyone who uses Bitcoin is a tiny fraction of the bank of Bitcoin. But where do Bitcoins come from? With paper money, a government decides when to print and distribute money. Bitcoin doesn't have a central government. With Bitcoin, miners use special software to solve math problems and are issued a certain number of Bitcoins in exchange. This provides a smart way to issue the currency and also creates an incentive for more people to mine. And since miners are required to approve Bitcoin transactions, more miners means a more secure network. The Bitcoin network automatically changes the difficulty of the math problems, depending on how fast they're being solved. In the early days, Bitcoin miners solved these math problems with the processors in their computers. Soon, miners discovered that graphics cards used for gaming were much better suited to this kind of math. Graphics cards are faster, but they use more electricity and generate a lot of heat. The first commercial Bitcoin mining products included chips that were reprogrammed for mining Bitcoin. These chips were faster, but still power-hungry. ASIC, or Application-Specific Integrated Circuit chips, are designed specifically for Bitcoin mining. ASIC technology has made Bitcoin mining even faster while using less power. As the popularity of Bitcoin increases, more miners join the network, making it more difficult for individuals to solve the math problems. To overcome this, miners have developed a way to work together in pools. Pools of miners find solutions faster than their individual members, and each miner is rewarded proportionate to the amount of work he or she provides. Mining is an important and integral part of Bitcoin that ensures fairness while keeping the Bitcoin network stable, safe, and secure. For more information about Bitcoin mining, visit bitcoinmining.com.
Yep.
How is the transaction routed to any particular miner?
It's broadcasted to the entire network. So when a transaction is initiated, it's broadcasted to the network, and the miners then voluntarily, arbitrarily, I should say.
Automatically. So how does it determine? How does it grab? How does the miner get it?
It's part of the network broadcast. So when you send a transaction to the network, that transaction, the software and the Bitcoin software sends a message out to the entire network saying there's been a transaction. And at that point, nobody's accepted it yet, but it's been broadcasted. And then what will happen is, eventually, a miner will confirm that transaction. And once that's happened, it's put into the database, and then it goes through a series of confirmations until that confirmation process has, propagated the entire globe.
Right, but that miner can't be a person sitting there pushing the button. It has to
No, it's all automated. It's all in the Bitcoin Core software. I really don't know.
So whatever the fastest computer is that's going to grab the network transaction? Or?
Yes, that's why Bitcoin mining is an extraordinarily expensive endeavor right now. I mean, if you want to have a mining farm, you're looking at starting at $100,000 in equipment. You can't do it on personal computers anymore. So yes, the faster computers have much more likelihood of getting the block, what they call the block reward for being able to mine faster. So yes, yeah. Let's go.
You mentioned that the miners have to approve certain transactions and things.
The miners, it's from what I understand, and I'm not a miner myself, so some of those are a lot of low-level software questions, but you can configure your software to allow or accept certain characteristics of transactions. You can configure it to not accept zero-fee transactions, and those miners will just ignore your transaction altogether. Other miners will then probably accept your transaction, but it's all automated within the software. It's not like there's somebody sitting there doing that. That's automated within the mining software that's installed on the machine, depending on how it's configured by the user.
That was a prelude to my real question.
Yeah.
Which is these huge computers that
Yeah.
now exist. Can they dominate this field?
It's a very good question. It's called a 51% attack, and that's something we'll talk about in just a minute. Actually, that's on my list, so we'll talk about that as well. You got a question also?
So when they talk about solving math problems, what
Mm-hmm.
they're really saying is that individuals who are miners are really donating processing.
That's all they're doing. Yep. That's all they're doing. Yep, and it's the processing power that is basically there to grow the network, to mint the new Bitcoins, to put the transactions into the ledger.
That's how the internet is sustained as well.
Exactly right. The internet's a decentralized model, so this is no different. It's just used for currency in this case, or digital asset transfer. Let's get back into here. So, what does this mean for a merchant? What we're doing in Cleveland Heights is we have a lot of merchants who now accept Bitcoin as payment. One of the things we wanted to do was build this thing to see who else in Cleveland was thinking about Bitcoin. We knew that some of the bigger markets, New York, Atlanta, Chicago, were thinking about and doing things with Bitcoin. We didn't know what the Cleveland market was, so we thought let's build a community where we can talk about Bitcoin, accept Bitcoin as payment, and see what happens here. The incentive for the merchant, it's a free sign-up. They can pay 0% in fees to accept the Bitcoin transaction. The payment process we see here, such as BitPay, Coinbase, GoCoin, they will take the volatility risk for the merchant, and the merchant can get the full dollar value no matter what happens to the Bitcoin network. It can crash and go down to zero, and the merchant's still going to get full dollar amount in their account, their bank account, the next day or two. So a lot of these industries are popping up now. These are all American companies that specialize in third-party payment processing, much like any other bank would do for credit card networks. It's just that instead of paying these fees, which take right out of the bottom line of a small business, you're paying 0 to 1% depending on which service you use. So that's kind of the incentive for a business to accept Bitcoin. Again, a consumer to use Bitcoin is a whole different type of incentive, and a merchant. This is something a merchant can offer as a service to their customers for practically nothing. Whether or not the customers come is a whole other story. What we've shown in Cleveland Heights is that they are coming and quite readily. And I can show you here what this looks like from a merchant perspective. We're using BitPay, which is out of Atlanta, and for free you can sign up to accept Bitcoin, and you can put in your bank account, and anything you do to accept Bitcoin will be transferred to your U.S. bank account. You can also choose to save a percentage of that in a Bitcoin wallet. So if you want to play with the market, you're free to do that. So one way to get Bitcoin is to trade with real people, real money for, or whatever fiat currency for Bitcoin. Another way is to buy them at an exchange like Coinbase. And another way is to mine them. And another way is to accept Bitcoin at your business and then not convert them into dollars. In this case, I'm going to show you a simple Bitcoin transaction. So QuickTime's not on this machine. Well, we might have to show that later off my own machine. You know what I can do is I can show it online. Unless they can install QuickTime on here. Well, maybe I'll show this after the Q&A for those who are interested. But anyway, basically what this is a POS system that you're used to. If you ever use Square or any other POS system, basically, if I hit next to it, it'll show just a number pad, and you put in the dollar amount of your sale. You know, I sold a hamburger for $8.50. What it will do then is give a QR code like we saw earlier, and it will show you the $8.50, and it will also show you the live exchange rate of what that is in Bitcoin. And you can show it to the customer, they can scan it, send it, the transaction's over.
Buy Bitcoin instantaneously before while you're in the store?
You can with Coinbase if you wanted to. So if I wanted to, I could buy the Bitcoin that I'm about to spend right now on my phone and then spend it here, unless I already had some which I could use from a previous transaction. But yeah, you could certainly do that if you wanted to mitigate the volatility. The other option that some of these companies do, such as Coinbase, is they do automatic rebuy. So as soon as you spend money, it rebuys it out of your checking account. So you don't lose out of the volatility that way either. Yeah.
Suppose I buy all the software I need to be a miner, and I go to mine a Bitcoin. It's still going to cost me $400 American dollars to mine that Bitcoin, correct?
No, because the Bitcoin is rewarded to you for the work you're putting into your computer. So you have to buy the computer equipment, install the software, pay for electricity bills to run that all equipment, and then, you know, once you're rewarded for the work you've done, you'll be rewarded in Bitcoins. So you won't be paying for it, you'll be paying for it for all the computer equipment you're maintaining.
Could I take that Bitcoin and buy $400 worth of gold down that hard gold coin?
As long as they accept Bitcoin, sure. You could take the Bitcoin and cash it out to cash, yeah. So a lot of miners, what they do, and there's a lot of miners in Cleveland, they'll set up a big data center in their basement and spend thousands of dollars on computers and $500-600 a month in electricity bills, and they'll mine Bitcoins. And often what they'll do is they'll take that money straight to Coinbase, cash out to dollars so they can pay their electricity bills, and keep the rest in their Bitcoin wallet so they can speculate on the market and spend it as consumers. So, or buy new mining equipment that does their mining faster. So that's how a lot of miners work, basement miners work, I should say. Talk a little bit about Bitcoin Boulevard, what we've built in Cleveland Heights, and what this really means, and kind of how we'd like to see it grow. So again, the vision was, we'd seen these mom and pops around the world say we accept Bitcoin and they get worldwide media attention. And we saw why they were doing that. They were embracing a new technology, they were embracing something controversial yet useful, but they were also experimenting with an electronic payment technology where they could accept payments globally without any fees. And we thought that was pretty cool. So this was also something that we might be able to use locally. So I approached some small businesses, one of which the owners here, Adam from the Wine Spot in Cleveland Heights, to discuss this idea and create a destination for, again, the general public locally to come and become demystified about Bitcoin, to come and use Bitcoin if they are Bitcoiners and familiar with it, and to talk about it, and also to attract Bitcoin tourism, because we are kind of a hub between some of the major cities, and use it as a case study for Bitcoin endeavors, depending on what happens with this technology in the future. For us, it was $0 to implement, except for time investment. And if anything does happen with the Bitcoin network, we can shut it off even quicker than we put it up. And what's resulted is an enormous amount of interest from global media. We've had, when we talk about Bitcoin tourism, we now see people coming from New York and London and Chicago and Pittsburgh, and we even had a crew from South Korea come up just to see our road and do a documentary on it and spend their money here. So it really was a way for us to showcase that we have a small business district that is all local businesses that are thinking and not afraid to embrace new ways of doing business. And it's worked out for us really well. And we think that that's one of the big alluring parts about Bitcoin is the brand awareness you can get from it at this stage in the game. If this ever does become a ubiquitous technology like we are used to PayPal these days, these kind of stories aren't going to really make news anymore. But we knew there was a time opportunity, And so part of that was really to showcase the innovative spirit of our community and to showcase, yet again, another aspect of Cleveland and Northeast Ohio that we're not asleep, and we're thinking about new and innovative ways to do business and build businesses. So you can come to Bitcoin Boulevard. There's about 7 businesses on the street where you can spend Bitcoin and talk to the merchants about it and talk to their staff about it. And there's several other businesses in the area that work out of their home and service-oriented businesses that also accept Bitcoin as well. And that is growing from this initiative. I'd like to introduce Adam Fleischer. He is the owner of one of these businesses called The Wine Spot, who Bitcoin was completely not on his radar when I approached him about it. And so he can talk to you a little bit about his journey with Bitcoin as a small business owner. Would you like the...
Sure.
Here's that.
Okay. Hello, can you hear me? Is it okay? All right. Well, thanks for having us today to talk about Bitcoin and Bitcoin Boulevard. So are there any business owners in the audience? Anybody own your own business? We do have some. Okay. All right. So I've got a few slides. I kind of threw some information together. There's a lot we can talk about. I've got 10 minutes, I've been told, and then some QA. So we can take this in any direction you want. But let me give you some background on myself, tell you a little bit about what we've done. The technology bores me. I mean, I could sleep through this. Some of you may like it. But there's a whole different perspective on Bitcoin and what is happening and what we've been able to leverage in Cleveland Heights. It's really, really fascinating and has been a lot of fun. And I think if you're a business owner or part of a community, you can also kind of be part of this thing, because I do believe it is the future of currency. But that's my personal opinion. But feel free to ask me any questions. So I am the owner of a place called The Wine Spot in Cleveland Heights. We've been open for about 2.5 years. If anybody knows Lee Road, Cedar and Lee area, about the theater, we're right next to the Stone Oven. It's a great location. We're in the old Sites Aiken hardware store. We're the 3rd business in a 100-year-old building. So it's a great place to be in Cleveland Heights. And we're sort of a retail wine and craft beer place, but we have a lot of space, so people like to come up there with their families and hang out, have a glass of wine or beer. They bring in pizza and they sort of hang out. So we're kind of a destination place, not unlike the downtown Hudson area, if you will. So that's who we are. And as Nikki said, when we opened the store up 2.5 years ago, we never envisioned this. But a lot has happened in the past 5 or 6 months. My personal background is I'm from Cleveland Heights. I was a medic in the Air Force for a few years. I got out. I went to Cleveland State. I got into something called electronic medical records, a healthcare IT field, not as a technology person, but because of my background in healthcare, I implemented this new technology called EMRs, electronic medical records, if you've heard of them. And I did that for 20 years, and I worked for some really big companies like McKesson and AmerisourceBergen and Cerner, if you've heard of those guys. So I really came out of the corporate world. And being in technology, and being in EMRs, which 20 years ago was an emerging technology, it was very new and very cutting edge, I saw a lot of things that worked and a lot of things that did not work. So when Nikki came to speak with us about Bitcoin, I at least listened to it, because if you're a business owner, you get asked, you get about crazy ideas every day. People are knocking on your door and they've got these great ideas. You tend to push a lot of them off. Well, I guess my background, I gave him 5 minutes, and here we are. So how do we move this thing forward? 5 minutes, and a year later, here we are today. So again, from my perspective, if you're a merchant, there's certain challenges that you have, and there's things that keep you up at night, right? And to me, it really has nothing to do about technology. The things that I think about at 2, 3 in the morning is how do I compete in a very competitive marketplace, right? I mean, I can talk about 10 different locations in Cleveland, from Waterloo to West 25th to downtown to Little Italy, that we're competing for people's attention. So how do I get noticed, right? How do we generate revenue? How do you make money in your business, right? Because if you don't stay open. And when you have a business, how do you run it in a manner where you're running it efficiently and you're actually making a couple bucks, right? There's a few bucks left over at the end of the day. Hopefully you can reinvest in your business. You can hire more people. All of that helps you. It helps your community. It's all good stuff, right? That's the type of thing that I think about. So when Nikki approached us about a year ago, it's been about 11 months, it was last fall, about the idea, we did listen, and it was intriguing enough. So I had not heard of Bitcoin, by the way, okay? But conceptually, it was interesting enough to where we said, you know what, give us some time, let us look into it. And we started doing some research, just like you did, just started looking at the internet. And the more I dug into it, the more I thought that I couldn't really think of a reason why I would not do it. So there's a couple different ways of looking at Bitcoin. You can look at it as an investment tool. Right? A lot of you are asking questions around what's the value, how to get the value back, not unlike the stock market. Okay? It's risky, it goes up and down. I don't own Bitcoin. I've never traded in Bitcoin, and I don't necessarily, I'm not asking you to go out and buy Bitcoin. That's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it, which is what I did, is looking at it as a way to address my business challenges and generate some revenue. And it seemed to me, based on the research that I did, not unlike the internet 20 years ago, is this thing has legs. This is not going away. And the analogy that I use, I think a lot of you can probably relate to, is about 20 years ago, the conversation was, is it VHS or is it beta? Remember that? Well, you can pull up your iPhone right now, which probably a few of you have, and watch a movie real time at no cost. So those technologies have been leapfrogged multiple times by new technology. And in my mind, that's the way I looked at it, is Bitcoin may not exist in a month, it may not exist in a year, but conceptually, everything's moving to digital and everything's moving to the internet. I don't see it going away, and I want it to be on the front end of this thing called Bitcoin. And I thought if we do it, some people would probably show up and spend their Bitcoin with us, but I was thinking, I bet we get some attention out of this. And we've gotten a little bit of attention. So, I'll talk about that too. If you are a business owner and you're thinking about, is this right for me? You have to look at your business. You have to look at the regulations around your business. We have a liquor license, so I have to work around those requirements. You've got to think about your workflow. You've got to think about all the things that impact your business, and is it the right fit for you? You've got to look at the pros and cons, and we did that. If you decide you want to go down the road, you've got to find somebody, because you can't know everything. You don't know technology. You may not know everything about it. You've got to find somebody that you can trust to work with you to make sure you do it the right way. And Nikki, who is CoinNEO, has been tremendous to work with, and I would recommend anybody that's interested in it to talk with Nikki. But we took a very, a very prescribed approach to it. Once we made the decision that we wanted to go down this road with Bitcoin, we built a project plan. We looked at how we integrate in the process with our point of sale system, the cash register, because it couldn't disrupt what we did every day. And so that took some time, it took some effort. We had to set up the Bitcoin wallet and the exchange, but my cost of entry was $0. It took me not one penny of money to get up and running with Bitcoin. Training for our employees took less than 15 minutes, I'd say probably about 5 minutes. And so it was super easy and super inexpensive, very unlike most things you invest in your business. So that was a positive. And I can talk about everything that's happened, but the reality is, do you mind?
Next one?
Yeah. So we started talking about last fall. We went up and running on Bitcoin on February 1st. Everybody on our street, the other merchants, the other business owners, the local government, when we talked about the fact that we're going to go up with this cryptocurrency, looked at us like we were crazy, 3 eyes. They wouldn't even talk to me. Within 6 weeks of us being up on Bitcoin and being in Cleveland Plain Dealer, Cleveland.com, NPR, we had a two-page write-up in Newsweek, Washington Post, Fusion Television. I mean, the attention that we got by just putting on Facebook that we now accept Bitcoin was overwhelming. We were getting calls from around the country, Spain, Italy. I mean, it was overwhelming. And so once I started to tell my fellow merchants, what was going on, by May 1st, we had 7 or 8 or 9 other businesses that were up and running on it because they saw the value, and they weren't necessarily willing to take the risk, so they were happy with me going out there and kind of jumping off the cliff first. But that's what happened. And in the past few months, Overstock.com has announced that they're taking Bitcoin online. Dell Computers, which professional basketball team?
Sacramento Kings.
Sacramento Kings now takes Bitcoin for merchandise and tickets. PayPal just announced an agreement with Bitcoin. Square, that we use for transactions, is now getting some involvement with Bitcoin. What else? I mean, there's just all sorts. It's being normalized. The reality is 80,000 businesses around the world take Bitcoin. 80,000, that's a big number. So this is not as far-fetched and crazy as some people may think, especially if it's new to you. But it is out there, and I really do think it's just the beginning. This is, like I said, it's not going away, and the story just keeps getting better and better. We had this movie premiere on Friday, and it was just one of the most exciting things we've been involved in. So it's not too late if you want to get involved. And gosh, there was something else I wanted to say, but I'm sure we'll cover it here in the Q&A. So.
Question about your business.
Sure.
What's in it for the consumer? I mean, unless the consumer realizes some type of cost savings from using Bitcoin, what incentive do they have in using it? I can see your perspective. You just want more customers, so you'll take whatever currency they'll give you.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounded to me like you weren't holding it anyway, so you take it in and you dump it the same day, and that reduces your risk.
Well, we did. Let me address that real quickly. So having a liquor license is really very strict regulations, and you have to, basically, I wanted to get U.S. dollars and minimum selling price, which is a regulation in Ohio. So by taking Nikki's Bitcoin, sending it to BitPay, exchanging it for U.S. dollars, guaranteed at that minimum selling price, it treats it just like a credit card. So that decision, if I could, I would like to take some Bitcoin, but I don't. So that addresses that. I'm doing it because I did it because of state regs.
Why would you hold it if because of the volatility? Wouldn't you be experiencing some risk that you really wouldn't want?
Well, again, there's two sides to it. I separate those sides in my mind. Let me go back to the consumer question. There are a lot of people that have made a lot of money in Bitcoin. The first Bitcoin transaction was somebody paid 10,000 Bitcoins for a pizza. $300 today for Bitcoin, per Bitcoin. If that person who got the $10,000 for the pizza held on to that Bitcoin, they made a heck of a lot of money. And there's a lot of people out there with a lot of money, and they're looking for places to spend their Bitcoin. So I am offering people that hold these Bitcoins, especially in a brick and mortar setting. There's more places online that are taking Bitcoin, but to walk into a business and say, I've got Bitcoin, I want to spend it, it gives them somewhere to go. And I've had people from all over Ohio come to us to spend it. So that's one reason. And I wanted to give my customers another option of payment because we all know that credit cards charge me a lot of money, but they also charge you to hold those credit cards. If you carry balance, you're paying interest. So if you have Bitcoin, you can reduce a lot of your costs too.
Your customers come in and say, yeah, it's so much cheaper to pay with Bitcoin than it is for currency, or they may not even realize that there is a difference because of they just calculate whatever the transaction is for the day and then say, yeah, that seems fair. I mean, is everything going back to the dollar as the basis for determining the value of whatever you're selling for that day?
Let me give you a different perspective on it, then we'll address that. A year ago today, if I was standing at my counter and 100 people came in my store, 99.5 of those people had never heard of Bitcoin. A year later, everybody in the community knows about Bitcoin. Even the junior high kids are talking about Bitcoin. We've got customers that are in their 80s that are talking about Bitcoin. So I think it's opening up their minds to a new tool that they can use. So that.
Bitcoin and any other virtual wallet that's offered in dollar-based terms as opposed to Bitcoin-based terms? What's the difference? Other than somebody thinks they're going to save, unless there's some kind of savings for the consumer.
Yeah.
Consumer, a lot of it is protections. I mean, there are thousands of digital currencies out there, from Amazon gift cards to Apple. Apple doesn't have their own currency. They opted out of doing that. They created their wallet, but all their wallet is doing is storing your credit card information.
Right. But it's still fast and easy, which is what I'm assuming some of this Bitcoin coolness is about, right? So they just swipe their phone and they're done.
Sure, and what Apple's doing is revolutionary and something that's needed and something Bitcoin also answers, which is they're taking out the personal identification of your credit card and encrypting it onto the wallet app so you can use it without risking your personal exposure. That's something that really hasn't been out yet, and that's something that I think is great that they're doing. They're riding on the rails of the fiat currencies, and that's fine. That's their business model. A lot of people speculate that Apple will come out with their own coin. They already have their own currency. It's called iTunes money. I mean, when you buy an iTunes thing and you buy some of iTunes, you talk about 2.5% of a charge. If you ever sold anything on iTunes, you know that Apple takes 30% if you've ever sold anything off of iTunes. Now, that is unsustainable from both a consumer and merchant standpoint. You just have to keep raising your. Well,
they'll do that as long as they can get away with it, too.
Well, exactly. So, as a consumer, yeah, those are two very different demographics, the merchants and the consumers. And, again, the consumers that we're targeting are the people that, A, have made a lot of money off this, and, that 1 or 2 cents of their transaction is nothing compared to the who knows how much they've made off of it.
Right.
But also...
That was in the beginning. I see the people making a lot of money off of it now are the people that are investing in the infrastructure to put it in place for people to actually use it. Well,
correct. So what we're doing is...
That's the value that you're creating.
So those people take a lot of fun in spending Bitcoin at brick and mortar places because they've helped build the architecture. They see where it can go. They're not going to spend a lot of their Bitcoins, but they might spend $15 worth of it at a brick and mortar place. So what we've done is created a locale where you can get a diversity of business offerings, low-cost offerings, where you can come as somebody who is let's say you are somebody who's a software developer who's building the architecture, who's working on it, who doesn't want to spend their Bitcoins, but might find it fun to and support businesses who support it. They're willing to come out and buy a cheeseburger using their Bitcoins. They're not going to come out and spend a couple $1,000 perhaps on something. But it's a lot of fun for people that are enthusiasts to be able to buy this digital currency and then go spend it at their local establishment. So, we're not going after the big money, but what we're also going after is the community aspect of it. We want to find the incentive for the businesses. One of the things I could bring to them was saying, hey, listen, I am the organizer of the Cleveland Bitcoin Meetup Group. We have, right now, about 90 people strong, and I can bring those people to your establishment for our meetups every month. I don't care what they pay in, Bitcoin, cash, credit cards. This is a good place for them. It's relevant to them. It's relevant to the work everybody's doing, and it brings some money to the street, into the neighborhood. So I don't think American consumers are really fit for Bitcoin, to be honest with you. I think it's fun for enthusiasts, and it opens up new sources of revenue for various reasons for merchants.
Well, I disagree. I think it would be if there was some incentive for the consumer.
If there was incentive. There are incentives for maybe not the American consumer. And there's different ways of using Bitcoin. One of the stories I love to tell is about a store called Revive on Lee Road. They're a fair trade gift store. They have clothing and jewelry and all sorts of different things. And Lisa, who owns Revive, travels all over the globe to source her products from artisans directly. And when she travels, she has to convert her money into a whole host of different global currencies. She has to pay fees every time she does it. Anytime she wants to do wire transfers to her artisans, she has to pay $50 per wire transfer. She does these so often. Oftentimes her money gets held up in foreign banks and she has no idea where the money is. Her artisans haven't gotten it. So the prospect for her to be able to take Bitcoin on her travels and spend it or send it to people that are underbanked. You talk about the underbanked in the world. Look at India and the continent of Africa. You have probably somewhere of close to 2 billion, if not more, cell phones that they own that are on the internet, yet they can't get bank accounts, whether that's because of poverty or through government manipulation or through oppression or what have you. This kind of technology makes worldwide commerce with the underbanked completely possible for people like Lisa at Revive, and also for the artisans and the people and the entrepreneurs in these countries trying to do the businesses themselves. They already have the internet. Now they have access to a global store of value, that's where I really get excited about it.
I can see that for sure.
I also get excited about the possibility of using Bitcoin technology, blockchain technology for transparent, open, and fair elections. You know, the blockchain, which we haven't seen yet, every transaction in Bitcoin's history is publicly viewable. If you bought something 3 years ago, you can go and look at that transaction today. It's completely transparent in that regard. It doesn't have your personal information attached to it, but if you know what that transaction number was, you can go look at it. It cannot be manipulated. Cannot be revoked or duplicated. So if you think of that about using the blockchain as an election system, whether local, state, or for whatever, or for a contract system of any type, that's a pretty revolutionary way of looking at a technology to accomplish a lot of these kind of things. You have a question in the back?
A Bitcoin gift card, walk into your brick-and-mortar shop, give you $100, and they'll give me a card that would be equivalent to Bitcoins, and then I could use the card.
Yeah, you can do that right now. There's actually a card out there which you can use at any place that can swipe a Visa and MasterCard, yet it will actually take out of your own Bitcoin wallet. So it actually doesn't... But you have to have a Bitcoin wallet. The other thing you can do is there's Bitcoin ATM machines, which operate much like vending machines. You put your money in, and it will shoot Bitcoins out to your cell phone wallet or a printout with the Bitcoin key on your printout. And you can use that to then pay for goods and services like you would a gift card. So there are these things that help consumers to get Bitcoin immediately and spend it immediately. So yes, you can go to a Bitcoin ATM machine, which we don't have on Lee Road yet. Again,
we're working on it.
Federal regulations, money service businesses. It's a very expensive and kind of gray area to operate a Bitcoin ATM, but we're really working on it and hoping to get one. So you can just put $20 in and get $20 worth of Bitcoin out and spend it on the road. Yes, you had a question?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
How do you set a retail price of Bitcoin if the currency is volatile?
Again, we do not take Bitcoin. We work with an exchange. So let's say you have $10 in Bitcoin. You come into my shop and you want to buy something for $5. Through the electronic process, the QR code and the electronic wallets, you punch in $5. So basically, in essence, you're sending a fraction of your Bitcoin to an exchange, and that $5, American US dollars, gets deposited in my account, not unlike a credit card. A credit card is a piece of plastic that says you have $10 in your account. I trust that, right? I get an acknowledgement when you swipe your plastic card that, yeah, it's been approved. Same thing with the Bitcoin transaction. And then the next day, that $5 US, which is what I sold it for you, gets put into my account. And that's low risk, almost no risk for me.
Okay, so
Yeah.
more or less, I don't know what those transactions are just taking the places of the banks and of the merchant services that you...
Exactly. Zero transaction fee. There are months that I can make my house payment on what I pay the credit cards to take their money. If I can get more of those transactions moved from credit cards to Bitcoin, I can save a lot of net dollars, and I can use that money to pass savings back on to you as a customer or reinvest in my business.
I have one more question. This is more technical. Could you explain blockchain? What the heck is that?
You want me to explain it?
You got it?
This is about as technical as I can get, and I may be wrong.
Go for it. No, I'd love to hear your interpretation.
So the way I see it is blockchain is the code. So is the code that's tied to a Bitcoin. So when you spend that coin, when you spend that Bitcoin, blockchain is the code, the transaction record that gets published to everybody on the internet. It's not secret, but it contains no personal information. So JP Morgan just got hacked, Target, dollars get stolen, checks get stolen, your personal information gets stolen. No personal information is tied to that code, and that's the data that moves across that is the record for Bitcoin transactions. How's that?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, it's yeah, that's more...
In layman's
yeah,
terms.
In layman's terms, yep. Yeah.
That's the value that I see, is your personal information is not tied to that currency, and it's published and everybody can see it.
Yeah. The blockchain is the ledger.
Right.
So and the blockchain exists on every miner's computer. When you start the mining software, you have to download the blockchain. It is the database that is the public ledger. It's about 30 gigs in size right now. It takes a long time.
So let me ask a question, because I'm not an expert here. I'm you that's been taking it. But so say you have a stack of $1 bills. somebody steals that money or you lose that money, unless you wrote down every serial number on those dollar bills, that money's gone. You'll never see it again. If you have $100 in Bitcoin with the blockchain, if for some reason that's lost, Nikki, but that blockchain shows up somewhere, you can track that back to you. Is that?
If you lose the money?
If that Bitcoin is gone because you have a record of that chain, is there any way to track that in the future?
You can see where it went, but you might not be able to see, you won't know who's
got
attached
it.
to it. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. So
That's one of the things you got to be aware of, because if you lose like the information on your computer or whatever, don't you basically?
yeah. So Bitcoin, and you know, before you ever invest in it, you got to be very, you got to really understand how wallets work, how digital wallets work. Some are cloud-based. Some are based right on your phone itself. In which case, your phone literally is your wallet. If you lose your phone, your money's gone. Just like if you lose your wallet, your money's gone. Bitcoin was designed to operate like cash, but digital cash. It makes no promises and no securities to be able to get it back if you lose it. I mean, if you lose your Bitcoin wallet, your money's gone. There are lots of ways to secure yourself so that doesn't happen. There's ways to actually take your Bitcoin and print it out to physical goods. I could print my Bitcoin out to this podium if I wanted to and store this podium in a safe deposit or a safe place where nobody could touch it. It couldn't be hacked. It's a physical good. You know, these are more advanced topics. These are things you'd want to consider if you are having very high investment in Bitcoin. It's called cold storage, taking your Bitcoin off of the internet so it can't be hacked by anybody. Very powerful tools that you can use as an investor, and also, you know, they're also kind of fun tools. You can get, you know, custom. You can make your own custom bills if you want. You can print your Bitcoins to those bills, you know. And if I give that to Adam, I no longer have access to my Bitcoin. He's got all the keys he needs to re-access all that money, and I can't get that back. So, again. Going back to what the blockchain is, I mean, it really is the central ledger that coordinates all the assets and all the transactions. It's just a big, big database. And you can go and look at every transaction that's ever occurred.
30 gigs today, what's it going to look like in 4 years?
It's only gotten to 30 gigs in 4 years, so, you know.
Yeah, but if it's growing exponentially, what's it going to look like?
And
Let's just say it's 100 gigs. That's still a really tiny database. I mean, I have a database at my small business office that's 120 gigs. You know, I don't think. I think today we're talking in petabytes. You know, we're talking in terabytes and petabytes, and you know, all the, I don't see data storage being ever an issue, especially with the bandwidth and products we have these days. This is something you can download to a laptop these days if you wanted
I
to.
see that the government has approved some of this. I'm wondering, like an IRS situation.
Yeah, sure.
They want to know certain transactions, X amount over. Okay, banks have to report all that information.
Yeah,
So now what happens with Bitcoins?
Well, it depends on how you're using them. So if you're using them, if you're a miner, or if you're using them as personal assets and personal wealth, the IRS says treat them as property. You know, just as you would a Ferrari or selling your house or doing any other kind of property investment, you treat it the same. So in that case, again, if you're going to convert those back into, or if you're going to convert those assets, if I buy Bitcoin today at 100 and I convert it for something at $200 tomorrow, I have a capital gain of $100. I have to account for that. That's my responsibility. Okay, and if I get audited, I have to prove that. You can use the blockchain to prove that. You can keep records on your own, just as you would with any other type of business you're doing with properties.
How does the federal government know you receive?
They don't, but they also don't know you just, you know,
Okay.
bought a car from,
A cash.
shoes from somebody, you know.
Right.
You know, so it's in that regard, it's just like property. So no, the government isn't looking over your shoulder. They really can't with Bitcoin. It's almost impossible. But if you want to be a responsible citizen and pay your taxes and do all that, that is something that you certainly want to consider doing. In Adam's case, third-party payment processors, they will actually send you 1099s every year if you decide to keep Bitcoins as opposed to cash or as a split, so you can figure out your capital gains and losses at the end of the year. Now, that's IRS's rules. If you go to FinCEN, who they regulate money service businesses. They consider it money. So if you want to start an exchange, if you want to start an ATM business, if you want to do something where you're actually transferring money between third parties, then you are regulated as a money service business, just like Western Union or anybody else of that nature. That's a whole different set of rules. So right now, this is one of the main problems that are kind of holding up some development and some gray areas. We want a Bitcoin ATM on Lee Road, but I don't want to get one there unless it's covered by a money service business license under FinCEN, which is extraordinarily expensive. Can we get a Bitcoin ATM for under $1,000 on Lee Road? Yes, but that's going to come without the licensing. Some people argue all it is a vending machine. It's property. It's no different than selling a candy bar. If IRS considers it property, then how is it different from a vending machine? You know. However, no one wants to take that risk. And the way that the market is moving is that all the major companies are going with FinCEN's regulation that it is money, and we're hoping that the IRS can come up with some new rules to help kind of fit other business models, because it doesn't really fit a lot of business models that Bitcoin is used for. It fits some. It certainly works for investments, but again, as a consumer, they don't require us to pay capital gains and losses if we go to Europe and spend money there, even though there is a capital gain and loss. I mean, there is if we're traveling abroad. They give you a certain allowance on that. I think it's up to $600 in a day of volatility that you can. It might be $200. I can't remember the exact thing, but they waive that. If you're an international traveler, which they decided not to do with Bitcoin. They also decided not to really give it a kind of innovative look, but it's regulations we're talking about. Another issue that's come into play is the Ohio Liquor Control and the Ohio Department of Public Safety determined that they were going to use the IRS rules for Bitcoin, that it's property, and in Ohio you're not allowed to barter for alcohol. So they considered Bitcoin property, therefore you cannot barter for alcohol, therefore Adam can no longer accept Bitcoin for alcohol at his place of business. So he sells non-alcoholic items, cheese plates, retail goods.
No.
He's done.
Just a matter of time.
So it's like the bars and restaurants on Lee Road. They have to split the alcohol from their food bill, which they're used to doing other anyway for corporate customers and other customers. So it's not too big of a deal. It's certainly a challenge. Right now, this is our biggest challenge. What we want to do is, and it's part of the growing pains of growing this economy, is working with the regulators and trying to get at the table with them rather than having them make these rules for us. We have a number of initiatives right now that we're going to do to try to come up with some innovative ways and work with the state to have them maybe reevaluate this position. Yes?
Why would you even want an ATM for Bitcoin if it's a digital currency and it's all done digitally?
It makes it very easy to buy Bitcoin. I mean, if you don't want to set up an online account with an online service, if you want Bitcoins immediately, you can just walk into a store, put $20 and get $20 of Bitcoin out and walk out instead of, so it's kind of like, I probably wouldn't use one. It's more of one of those things that kind of help educate and bridge concepts with reality, and show that this is how it can be used. I mean, there might be cases where people just don't want to. With Bitcoin, there's a lot of people that are very concerned about privacy. They gravitate towards Bitcoin because they feel like it's a way to get away from third-party institutions looking at your money. And so ATMs might appeal to some people like that because they don't necessarily have to give over any identifiable information to get Bitcoins. You can just walk in, put money in a machine, and get it out. The machines we want on Lee Road that would fall under a money service business, these things actually require fingerprints and signatures, and also it's basically setting up a bank account because that's what FinCEN requires. So, we'll see what happens.
Can I buy a Bitcoin at an ATM with a bank card, or do I need cash?
It's a good question. I don't know. I'm not sure what the ATM technology is right now. I don't see why not. I don't see why you couldn't, as long as the ATM had the technology built into it.
Why wouldn't I use my debit card just to go buy wine in his shop then instead of buying Bitcoins?
You might not use that ATM to spend money. You might just use it to buy it for your own investment purposes.
I would do what again, please?
You might just use the ATM for your own investment purposes rather than actually spend it at shop. You might just use that ATM to get your Bitcoins easily, possibly. I'm not going to invest in Bitcoin's ATM personally because I have a lot of these same. I don't think they're profitable in the long run.
I'm just thinking, if I go and take $4 and put it in and buy $4 worth of Bitcoins and go buy a $4 bottle of wine, well, you probably don't deal
Right.
with 4 bottles of wine, do you? $4 bottles of wine. That's thunder.
$5.
Right.
Why wouldn't I just give them the $4 to begin with?
Right. Well,
You
what
know?
we see
Right.
is that having a Bitcoin ATM on Lee Road would be more for the allure of Bitcoin, more
It's-
for saying, how do I get Bitcoin? Come into my shop. You can buy it right here. We'll show you the app to download on your phone. It'll shoot it right to your app. You can go home and now you own Bitcoin. You can spend it here if you want, but I just got 1% off of your transaction anyway, so I don't care. So Bitcoin ATM also, just like any other ATM, you can add a percentage value for each transaction that the operator keeps or the landlord keeps.
It's definitely in the novelty phase, I think.
It's a novelty phase. This is why I don't really have interest in investing in one myself. I just don't think that there's enough money in it personally. But we do have people in our group that are actively investing in them and want to put one somewhere in Cleveland. They're a lot of fun. Yes?
So earlier you talked about printing a code on your piece of paper.
Yeah.
So if you made photocopies of that,
Yeah.
how does this technology prevent the misuse of that code or use of that?
Yeah. So again, this is something that can't. Again, we talked about not being you can't duplicate or whatever. So say you did photocopy 100 of these digital pieces of paper, 100 of these physical pieces of paper. The first person to use that paper and bring it back online would make anybody else subsequently who tried it. It would invalidate it. You wouldn't be able to bring that back online into a digital wallet. It just would. The Bitcoin network would see it and say this is already out here. It would drop it. It would drop it. It's already spent. Exactly right.
But you
Yeah.
don't want to give away your digital wallet information. That's what.
No. No, you wouldn't. So you want to treat it just like you would cash. I mean, it really is in that regard. The way you use it is, how would you store $1 million in cash if you didn't have a network of banks to put it in? Would you put it under your mattress or bury it or put it in a safe? A lot of these same kind of questions are out there for people that have that high wealth. I don't have that high wealth to have the answers quite yet. There are people out there that do. But yeah, and there are, I'm sure, services that will be that will come out that will offer you security for your Bitcoins at a cost. In which case, what's the point again? It's really now paying banking fees again. Yes.
It goes back to the mining of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
You say there's so many generated and so on.
Hmm?
Okay. What is keeping the people with the super fast computers from grabbing the new Bitcoins so that the people we talked about the basement money?
Mm-hmm.
To keep the people with a super fast computer from getting the Bitcoins rather than the people who are in the basement money?
You can't. So there's two ways to look at that. So you need to have very competitive hardware to be a Bitcoin miner. It is part of the market. The faster and faster hardware that comes out, the more expensive hardware that comes out, the more difficult it gets to mine Bitcoin. And to become a Bitcoin miner is almost impossible for anybody these days unless you have massive capital because you need certain equipment. Mind you, there's hundreds of other coins out there that are nowhere near as big as Bitcoin right now. So what people will do is they'll mine. They're called alternative coins or altcoins. And they'll mine altcoins. And then what they'll do is they'll use their equipment to do that. They'll generate altcoins, much like they would Bitcoin, and they'll trade those on an electronic exchange for Bitcoin, cash them out for cash to pay the electricity bill, keep the rest. So there's all sorts of ways to get into mining if you wanted to, but it's really becoming a very difficult thing to do because of all the capital you need.
I'd like to mention before people start leaving, there's a documentary playing right now through Thursday at the Cedar Lee Theater in Cleveland Heights called The Rise and Rise of Bitcoin. A lot of the things we're talking about are addressed in this documentary, and I'd say if you want to know more about it, invest the hour and a half, go down there and watch the movie. It is very entertaining. It was shot last year in Pittsburgh by a miner and his brother, and interestingly enough, the company, the LA-based company that bought the rights to the Rise and Rise of Bitcoin, the owner of that company actually lives in Cleveland. So he bought, I think it was the first time rights to the movie were purchased 100% in Bitcoin. I think he spent 500 Bitcoin, bought the rights to the movie, and now he's releasing it. So I think you'll be hearing more about it, but it's just released on Friday in Cleveland.
So to celebrate that, it's playing at the Cedar Leaf Theater for the next 2 nights. I have, one of the things I wanted to do was a raffle for anybody who might have time the next 2 nights. I've got 4 pairs of tickets for the movie at the Cedar Leaf Theater. If you're interested, fill out this raffle ticket and we can raffle them off. It basically answers the question again, what is Bitcoin?
You did.
You know, it's
Good
about
for
a
you.
Bitcoin miner who traveled the world to really kind of tell a story about Bitcoin. And he lives in Pittsburgh. Another thing that's also questioned, isn't this a big Ponzi scheme? You know, Ponzi schemes, often referred to as pyramid schemes, really require the rake of the people beneath you selling some kind of idea or product to make the people at the top more profitable. You know, it's pretty much completely opposite in Bitcoin. You know, in Bitcoin you have early adopters who put up a lot of risk to mine Bitcoins and get them cheaply, but they are just as volatile to the market as anybody else in the world. And anybody really has the freedom to opt in and opt out of Bitcoin as it is. It's really, truly a free market in that respect, and the exact opposite of a Ponzi scheme, especially considering its decentralized nature, and that there is nobody taking a rake off of you from the top. So here's some resources. CoinNEO.com is my website. Bitcoin Boulevard US highlights our project on Lee Road and other things that are happening in Cleveland. That also details the alcohol situation, what we're trying to do about that. Bitcoin.org has great information for learning about mining, learning about Bitcoin wallets, learning about storing your assets, where Bitcoin came from. If you are a merchant and are interested in accepting Bitcoin, bitpay.com, free to sign up, based out of Atlanta. You'll see them this year. They are sponsoring the St. Petersburg Bowl. They're now called the Bitcoin Bowl, so we'll see that if you're into football. And the Cleveland Bitcoin Meetup. We meet usually about once a month, and it's people from all areas of life, people that are novices or experts, miners, software developers, lawyers, academics. We meet up to discuss all things Bitcoin and monetary policy issues. So feel free to come to an event, or if you have a location you'd like to host an event, we have to say you don't have to accept Bitcoin to host an event, but if you do have a business where you or your executives or your staff are curious about it, we'd love to come and travel to your business and host a meetup there, and we can, you know, it's a little cash mob for you, and it's good for us to have a captive audience. You have a question?
Yeah, how many Bitcoin miners would you think there are in the Cleveland area?
Oh boy, that's hard. You know, I just talked to a guy. He was at the movie premiere last week. He's from North Olmsted. He's been dealing with digital currencies probably 12 or 13 years, you know, back way in the early video game currencies, and now he's got a 7,000 square foot mining operation in New York that he wants to move back to the Cleveland area. Hugely invested in it. There's lots of people that I've met through this meetup group. I probably met maybe 30 miners that just attend this meetup group alone, that are running, you know, a small network of computers in their basement. It's really hard to tell how many are actually out there number-wise. That's one of the things I wanted to do with this Boulevard project, was kind of uproot and see if really what is the activity happening in the Cleveland
There are
area.
people that have come out, you know, 2-3 streets away, saying, "Hey, I'm a miner."
I've been
you know,
mining for
so
3 years.
they're around. They're in their basement as we speak.
Yeah. And they can't believe that there's a place on Lee Road to spend these Bitcoins, you know, and so they come there and they spend them, you know. The other thing it's doing is some of our companies have online websites, and the global Bitcoin community is certainly out there spending their money. And so what we want to do is reach them too. So right now we're working on integrating their web stores so we can sell on Bitcoin Black Friday, for instance. Any other questions right now before we move on to this raffle drive? No? Okay. Yeah. The question was asked earlier about the 21 million Bitcoins. Why would anybody invest in it? My own personal perspective, and what the perspective is with a lot of people in the Bitcoin community, if this does take off, and it is a global phenomenon, and it does become a competitor to other world currencies, and you only have 21 million units of it to go around, we're not going to be talking in full Bitcoins anymore. Those are going to be so far out of reach financially for anybody to get their hands on because they'll be too expensive. You know, at $300 today, people that believe in the future of Bitcoin, people that are long on Bitcoin like me, 10, 15 years long on Bitcoin, feel like this is something that's going to take off. It might disappear, yes. That's why I personally don't invest much in it. However, the full one is pretty...
I don't know how valid this is, but I've heard people in the financial community speculating that once you start hitting that 21 million Bitcoin, they wouldn't be surprised if a Bitcoin goes to $10,000 in value. I mean, that's a number I've heard.
10,000, you've seen it at 100,000. I mean, if you look at a $2 trillion market cap on it, I mean, that's $100,000 of Bitcoin. So, and that would need to get there to be able to compete on a world level.
You know, if we were still on the gold standard, there'd be no inflation and there'd be no talk about Bitcoin. You know that?
Exactly right, and this is why it's often referred to as Bitcoin as gold 2.0. It's meant to be finite and something that can't be inflated. That's the big problem. Imagine if the country got to do a democratic vote every time our government wanted to print more money. This is what happens here. So 21 million is set in stone in the Bitcoin software. Can it be changed? Yes, if 51% of the miners agree to it. I will guarantee you that all the miners are not going to be interested in this because it defeats their own purpose for existence.
So when Bitcoins go up to $10,000 a coin, $100,000 a coin, gold's going to go up at the same rate because gold is something that you can actually hold in your hand and it's not out there in cyberspace. And gold has to go up with it.
Sure.
Then we will get back on the gold standard, and I guarantee you all the currencies of the world will be wiped out.
Right, and Bitcoin was also designed to kind of have parity with the way the gold markets work. I mean, there was a lot of, the white paper is very elegant to read. It's only 7 pages that kind of describes the whole invention that this guy, this entity invented. But, it really is meant to mimic gold. And, and in that case, in its utility, it's meant to mimic cash, transaction-wise, but its core product is really there to mimic a finite resource such as gold. And that's why there's a hard code limit in there. And it would be very difficult. The other thing that's a concern, we talked about miners and how having a lot of power, is something you hear often called the 51% attack. So what we saw in this mining video, something about pooled mining, so you have these people that they don't have enough processing power to mine Bitcoins, but they can join a pool and they can share that power and get a little fraction out of it. So what happens when a single private pool becomes so big that they now control 51% of the mining power out there? What you've now got is an entity, probably some person or team of people in an office somewhere in the globe, who have over 50% of the miners in the globe participating in their one pool. What that could possibly do, theoretically, is give those people who own this company the power to duplicate transactions, because they can then arbitrarily, they can then specifically choose which transactions to accept or reject. And that can only be done with a majority of miners participating. This, again, it's a real possibility. However, again, it's something that would be against the nature of their whole business model, because they completely devalue the currency immediately. So, there's a lot of movement out there for people, community movements in the Bitcoin community. Get out of these pools that are growing too big. There's plenty of them out there. Don't let anybody get over 51%. A lot of things can be changed in the protocol itself down the road. These are things that are going to be tested as time moves on, and we just don't have the answers for a lot of it yet. Yeah.
When did Bitcoin originate again?
2008 it was released. The white paper 2009 was when it was the first block was mined, basically, is what you call it, yeah, so 2009. Somebody had a question?
What's to keep the governors out of being miners?
Oh, they certainly can, and the government is already a big investor. So they recently took down a legal website called Silk Road, which was selling illegal goods for Bitcoin only. Part of the way they were able to do that was by using the blockchain to do forensics on the transactions, and it helped them find out who the people were that were running this network. And they took down the network, and they also confiscated the coins, which were held at the U.S. Marshal's office. The U.S. Marshal's office just auctioned off about $18 million worth of those coins. So, and they're still sitting on many, many more. So the government's already a big investor.
Well, I'm thinking more before government crashing the system. I mean, you get to countries like Russia that are extremely sophisticated in computer technology. And if they put their mind to it, what would be stop them from being the big 51% miner?
I don't think a single country has the population to be a 51% miner. I don't know. It's an interesting concept to ponder, but there are probably millions of miners out there. I couldn't even begin to speculate how many actual miners are out there right now. But it's an interesting concept to think about. What a country could do is completely buy out the entire market cap. Right now, it's only at about $5 billion for the entire Bitcoin ecosystem at today's exchange rate. They could just buy out the entire market cap and just wipe out the currency. What's going to happen? Another coin is going to pop right back up. You can't. That's not sustainable. Yes?
I read in one of my business journals, you can hide assets with Bitcoin.
Well,
how would that be done?
Hide like physical assets?
Hide money, let's say.
Well, sure. You could take your money and buy Bitcoin with it.
And it wouldn't be traceable. You can't find it.
Nope.
I'm going through divorce. That's why.
I was just gonna say. I was like, I hear a divorce story in here somewhere. It's actually becoming. There's actually a lot of cases. There's actually a lot of divorce cases popping up now where there are people. They're finding that people are hiding money in the blockchain so that they can't be seen or found out by lawyers and accountants. Yeah.
We're building a tunnel to Hawaii, so if anybody wants to invest in it.
What's that?
We're building a tunnel to Hawaii.
There you go. Any other questions? Yes.
Well, I'm confused about what she just asked, because she just said that the government is able to discover pools and confiscate.
For Silk Road.
The government can't confiscate it. They can participate in the Bitcoin ecosystem, but they have no way to confiscate your money. Unlike what happened in Cyprus not too long ago, where they actually, the banking system completely failed their whole country. And what they do, they went into the bank accounts of their private customers and took the money out to refund the country. I mean, this kind of stuff would not be possible with this type of system. Yeah.
I think that maybe I missed something when you said about the 18 million that was sold off.
Yeah, they confiscated the Bitcoins from the criminal network, and because they actually found the guy who held the Bitcoin wallet and confiscated his wallet. That's how they got access to it. They actually found the guy with his computer open in a library and confiscated his wallet. So if they hadn't have done that, if they had just found this guy walking around, there's no way they could have gotten his hands on his money unless he gave them it voluntarily, which probably would never happen. But once they had that, it was their property, just like they confiscate all sorts of property all over the globe, boats and cars and whatever, houses. And so they sold it as property, just like they do with everything else, at auction, at $18 million. Well, we have a raffle we want to pull up? Oh,
4.
Here we go.
4 pairs, right?
4 pairs. Steve Gotch?
Right here.
Oh, very good. All right. Rebecca's coming by. Rebecca, who's done a whole lot of work on behalf of Bitcoin and Bitcoin Boulevard. Don Eisenstadt? No?
May have left.
Did he leave? Don Eisenstadt?
Going.
Tom Deep-Tuing? Tom what is it? DeJoven. Okay, that's is that you?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
It's all right.
Looks like my handwriting.
Must be a doctor.
Yeah.
There's 2 more.
All right, Rebecca's got yours. Ed Dell, my old friend. How are you?
Very good, sir.
I saw you out there at the beginning. Monica Bear.
Oh, Monica left. I can take them for you.
Yeah? Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. I hope you learned something about Bitcoin. I'm sure you have many more questions. Feel free to reach out.